Go back to that drug from Zhongshan for a second. It still isn't approved in the United States. In China, more than 40,000 patients have already been treated with it. The discovery happens over there, so patients over there get it first. And the Western regulator waits for trials run on Western bodies before it says yes. The Chinese government negotiates the price down by 58 to 80%. But that same molecule, licensed to an American company, lands at whatever that company decides to charge. A cell therapy that runs up to $475,000 for an American patient can cost as little as $140,000 in China. Same science, you just wait longer to access it in the West and you pay triple. All of that is acceptable while China still needs Western money. But Beijing is fixing that need, and it published the plan. Out of every technology the Chinese state named a priority, biology is the only one it filed twice, as a core technology and as a future industry.
大家好，这里是华人看世界 CNView 频道。你可能想不到，如今全球进入临床试验的新药，竟有一半源自中国实验室，辉瑞、默克、GSK 和阿斯利康正花费数十亿美元，从中国药企手里购买尚未在西方上市的药物分子。他们买的究竟是技术，还是更宝贵的时间？一边是中国科学家用更低成本完成早期研发，另一边是西方药企面对专利到期、研发周期漫长和数千亿美元营收缺口。最典型的案例是一款在中国已经让数万名患者用上的抗癌药，它不仅显著延长无进展生存期，还让死亡风险降低了34%。可在美国却迟迟没有获批，价格也可能高出数倍。这场跨国交易表面上是合作，背后却牵动着药品定价、产业链安全和普通患者的生命选择。中国正在摆脱对西方资本的依赖，而西方药企也越来越离不开中国的创新。今天我们就来看看这场医药产业的大洗牌，究竟是谁掌握了主动权，又是谁最终为这套游戏规则买单
Half the new medicines going into patient trials anywhere on Earth start in a Chinese laboratory. Big Pharma understood this years before you did. Pfizer and AstraZeneca have committed billions of dollars to Chinese pharmaceutical companies since the start of 2025. They buy compounds no patient has ever taken. They pay, they take over the trials and the factories, and they sell it everywhere except China under their own brand. Beautiful business model, right? Then they go in front of journalists and say China is roughly 10 years off being a serious rival. Beijing has watched this work and decided to push harder. The Chinese state put biology near the top of the 5-year plan it runs to 2030. Electric cars were on that list once. Solar panels too. You know how this ends up. So think about where that leaves you. You don't get a vote in Beijing, and you don't get a vote in the Pfizer boardroom. They both decide for you anyway. In this video, I'll show you how far this has gone, what Big Pharma is really doing, and what it costs the people at the bottom of that chain. My name is Bertrand. I've spent 26 years doing business in Asia. That's why I created this channel, to share what I see from the inside. If that's useful to you, subscribe. Merck sells a cancer drug called Keytruda. Last year alone, it brought in $31.7 billion, close to half of everything the company earned. The bad news is, in December 2028, the patent will expire and rival manufacturers will start copying it. The people running Merck have known that date for years. They also know nothing else the company owns comes close to filling a hole that size. So the answer should be simple. Go back to the lab and invent the next drug. That's the job. That's what the research budget pays for, and these companies employ some of the best scientists alive. I'm talking about Merck, but every chief executive in the pharma business is looking at the same calendar. More than $300 billion of prescription drug sales lose patent protection before 2030, around a sixth of what this industry sells. Sounds like a problem, right? But for them, the math stopped working. Getting one new drug to market cost a big pharmaceutical company around $2.2 billion. And from the first human trial to approval, the wait runs close to 8 years. Start a molecule this morning, and you reach the pharmacy in the mid-2030s. So they went looking for medicine somebody else had already started. A Chinese laboratory hands them a compound that has already been through early testing on Chinese patients with the results attached. The Americans skip 5 or 6 years of the work and pick it up halfway down the track. Look at what GSK signed in 2025. $500 million in cash to a Chinese company called Hengzhui for rights to as many as 12 drug programs with up to 12.5 billion more if those drugs make it. What they're buying with that money is time. Now you know the buyers. Pfizer, Merck, GSK, names on the packaging in your bathroom cabinet. But do you know the sellers? Ask anyone in Europe to name one of them and you get silence. The company that forced this whole shift into the open didn't exist 15 years ago, and it was started by someone the Western industry had already employed and let go. Her name is Michelle Xia. Look for her in 2010 and you'll think she's a perfect product of the Western machine. A biochemistry degree in Guangzhou, a doctorate in England, cancer research in Kentucky, a quick stop at Bayer in California, then an antibody company in the Bay Area, and finally, a job running the joint venture Pfizer has set up with her employer. 20 years of training paid for the companies that now buy from her. In 2012, she rented an office in Zhongshan, a city 80 kilometers west of Hong Kong. 3 other scientists came with her. They had under $3 million, they took no salaries, and they hired researchers straight out of university because those were the ones they could pay. They called the company Akeso. 3 years later, Merck bought their first molecule. At the biggest cancer conference in the world, the same drug beat a rival immunotherapy on survival itself. 34% fewer deaths. What's funny is that ivonescimab is still not approved in the US. The worldwide trial hasn't produced survival numbers clean enough for a regulator. So, Summit paid $500 million 4 years ago for a drug they still can't sell to a single American patient. And that's one molecule from one company. Last year, Chinese labs signed 157 of licensing deals, and the press releases added up to $135.7 billion. But will they? If you go looking for that money, most of it never left the West. And the reason why tells you which side of the table is actually desperate. Out of that 135.7 billion, roughly 7 billion has been paid. The rest sits inside the contracts as milestones. Money lands if the drug clears its next trial, if a regulator says yes, or doctors prescribe it. Most drugs die somewhere along that road and the payment dies with them. Remember the deal GSK signed last year? The headline said $12.5 billion, but the cash that changed hands on that day was $500 million. So why would anyone sign that? Because at home, these companies can't get paid. When a Chinese lab wants its drug covered by the Chinese insurance system, it sits down with the government and the government sets the price. Last round, the companies that made it onto the list gave up 63% of what they were asking. You can invent in Shanghai the best cancer drug in the world and still lose money selling it in China. Meanwhile, the money that used to fund the Chinese labs has gone quiet. Chinese venture capital pulled back, so a lot of the labs now license their work early to keep the lights on. At Statris, we see companies execute licensing deals like this all the time. A big number goes into the press release. The number that reaches the bank account is often only a fraction of it, because the rest depends on milestones that may take years to achieve. For many founders, the cash they receive today is key and matters far more than the headline value of the deal. So look at the table again. On one side, a Chinese scientist with a molecule nobody at home will pay for. On the other, an American executive with a patent expiring in 2028 and shareholders who already know that date. Neither of them is negotiating from strength. That's why this market moves so fast. 3 years ago, the average upfront payment for one of those licenses was $52 million. In 2026, it's $172 million. Every year, the Chinese side asks for more, and every year, the Americans pay it. You might say, fine, the West still owns the patents, still takes the margin, and the science just happens somewhere cheaper. Well, it doesn't work like that. Europe found that out 20 years ago on the cheapest molecule this industry makes. And it has been paying whatever it is asked ever since. A group of investors look at the same dependency and turn it into a business model. Here's how the trade works now. You raise money in the United States. You fly to Shanghai and license a molecule that has already cleared its early testing over there. You register a company in Delaware, you hire 15 people, and you tell investors you're biotech. You didn't discover anything. You bought a finished piece of science and wrapped an American company around it. That model is winning the money. In the first half of this year, 2/3 of American biotech funding rounds went to companies that already had a drug in human testing. Now, a growing share of the new ones were built around molecules bought from China, which leaves the nice American scientist with an original idea and nobody funding him. He needs 8 years and a couple of billions to reach the same point a Shanghai lab can hand over much quicker. 219 biotech companies in the US have shut down in 4 years. Washington has noticed some of this. In December 2025, Congress passed a law called the Biosecure Act, aimed at cutting American public money away from Chinese biotech firms. Read what it covers. It restricts federal contracts and grants involving certain Chinese service providers. It says nothing about an American company licensing a Chinese molecule. They bolted down the back door and left the front one open. Since that law passed, the deals have got bigger. Now, I want you to understand something. Go back to that drug from Zhongshan for a second. It still isn't approved in the United States. In China, more than 40,000 patients have already been treated with it. The discovery happens over there, so patients over there get it first. And the Western regulator waits for trials run on Western bodies before it says yes. The Chinese government negotiates the price down by 58 to 80%. But that same molecule, licensed to an American company, lands at whatever that company decides to charge. A cell therapy that runs up to $475K for an American patient can cost as little as $140K in China. Same science, you just wait longer to access it in the West, and you pay triple. All of that is acceptable while China still needs Western money. But Beijing is fixing that need, and it published the plan. Out of every technology the Chinese state named a priority, biology is the only one it filed twice, as a core technology and as a future industry. Science turned into production, and production is the part nobody can license away from you. So, the state money goes into bioreactors, pilot plants, and the factories sitting under the laboratories. More than 20 provinces have put their own budgets and their own parks on top of that. Then, there's the half nobody outside the industry watches. Last year, the CCP opened a second insurance system at home, so that a Chinese lab can finally charge a real price to Chinese patients. Every reason Michel Xia has to sell her next molecule for cheap is being dismantled on a schedule in public. Finish that job, and the West stops being the customer keeping Chinese laboratories alive. It becomes a market China sells into at a price China chooses. I post twice a week to share my experience about business in Asia, from the inside. If that's useful to you,
回到这期视频最核心的问题，为什么全球制药行业正在越来越依赖中国实验室？答案并不只是因为中国拥有更多科研人员，也不只是因为研发成本更低。真正改变产业格局的是中国已经逐渐建立起一条从基础研究、早期试验到临床验证、规模生产，再到本土患者使用的完整链条。过去，西方药企掌握着资金、专利、品牌和销售渠道，中国实验室更多承担的是代工和执行工作。可是现在，越来越多真正有价值的药物分子，最早就是从中国的实验室走出来的。这场变化也暴露了传统制药巨头的一个困境。他们拥有庞大的销售体系和极高的利润，却未必能持续拿出下一款改变市场的重磅药物。面对专利到期、收入下滑和股东压力，重新投入多年研发当然是最理想的选择。但现实是，一款新药从首次人体试验到最终获批，往往要接近8年，还可能烧掉22亿美元。于是，直接购买中国实验室已经完成早期研究的项目，就成了更快、更现实的选择。他们买的并不只是一个化合物，更是几年时间以及一次避免被市场淘汰的机会。这也解释了为什么一份交易公告里的天文数字不能简单等同于已经到账的现金。所谓数十亿美元、上百亿美元，很多只是未来可能触发的里程碑付款。只有药物顺利通过后续试验，得到监管批准，或者真正进入医院和市场，剩余款项才会逐步兑现。对于中国药企来说，预付款却往往非常关键。国内融资收紧，单靠本土市场又很难快速收回研发成本，创始人必须用眼前的现金维持团队、推进试验，甚至保住公司的生存。 因此，看上去是西方巨头在挑选中国项目，实际上不少时候双方都被各自的压力推到了谈判桌前。以我系的故事尤其值得关注。康方生物最初只有几位科学家和有限资金，团队在并不宽裕的条件下起步，却最终研发出一款试图同时解除肿瘤免疫抑制、切断肿瘤供血的抗体药物。它在关键试验中展现出令人瞩目的结果，死亡风险降低34%，并且已经让数万名中国患者获得治疗。可是，同一款药在美国仍然需要等待更完整的临床数据和监管审批，这里面当然有科学标准、族群差异和风险控制的考量，但它也提醒我们，医学创新真正的价值最终应该体现在患者能否及时用上，而不只是体现在专利归属和资本估值上。更值得深思的是价格差异。中国通过集中采购和医保谈判，把部分药品价格压低了58%到80%，而同样的技术一旦换上西方公司的品牌，定价逻辑就可能完全不同。患者支付的不仅是药物本身，还包括市场营销、渠道费用、保险体系、股东回报以及企业对利润率的期待。于是最讽刺的局面出现了，药物可能在中国更早被患者使用，价格也相对低一些。而在西方市场，患者不仅等待更久，还可能承担数倍的费用。技术本身没有改变，改变的是谁掌握定价权，以及谁拥有进入市场的资格。原料药的经历，则说明产业依赖从来不是突然发生的。过去20年里，欧洲许多采购经理为了降低成本，逐步把生产环节转移到亚洲。站在每一次具体决策的当下，他们似乎都做出了合理选择，可无数个合理选择叠加起来，却让整个地区失去了关键产能。到后来，当供应链出现波动，欧洲才发现重新建设工厂不仅需要时间，还要面对60%左右的成本差距。药品产业尤其如此，一旦实验室、原料、设备、工厂和人才都集中到少数地区，其他国家即使保留品牌和专利，也未必保留了真正的议价能力。所以美国试图通过生物安全法案限制政府资金流向特定中国企业，却没有真正堵住美国公司购买中国药物分子的渠道。这个矛盾本身就很说明问题。政治上，西方希望减少对中国生物科技的依赖；商业上，资本却仍然希望利用中国已经完成的科研成果。资本不会因为口号就停止追逐效率，企业也不会轻易放弃一条能缩短研发周期、降低失败风险的道路。结果就是一边在制度层面强调脱钩，一边在交易层面继续加深联系。而中国正在做的事情是逐步改变这种交易中的位置。过去，中国实验室缺少足够的本土支付能力，只能把项目早早授权给海外公司，用较低价格换取现金。现在，国家资金开始投入生物反应器、中式基地、生产工厂和医疗保障体系，越来越多地方也在建设产业园区，提供配套支持。只要中国能够让创新药在本土获得合理回报，让实验室不必依靠海外买家才能活下去，那么未来的谈判就会发生变化。西方不再是维持中国科研机构生存的唯一客户，而可能只是中国药物进入全球市场时的一个买家。当然，这并不意味着中国所有药物都会成功，也不意味着西方制药企业会立刻失去优势。新药研发始终伴随着失败，监管标准、全球试验、生产质量和商业推广仍然是极高的门槛。真正值得观察的是，谁能把科研成果稳定地转化为产品，谁能在保证安全有效的同时控制价格，谁又能让患者更早、更公平地获得治疗。未来的竞争不会只是某个国家拥有多少实验室，而是谁拥有完整、可靠并且能够持续运转的医药产业体系。这期内容留给我们的启示，也许比中美之间谁赢谁输更加重要。药品不是普通商品，它关系到每个人的生命、家庭和尊严。当一款药在一个国家已经使用多年，另一个国家的患者却仍在等待审批，当同样的治疗在不同市场出现巨大价差，当资本可以跨越国界购买成果，却让普通患者承担最终成本，我们就有必要追问，创新究竟应该服务于谁？产业链的效率究竟是为了股东的利润，还是也应该转化为患者更短的等待和更低的负担？如果有一天一种特效药已经在深圳上市多年，价格只有你所在国家的1/3，而当地监管部门才刚刚批准，你会选择飞过去接受治疗吗？欢迎把你的答案和理由写在评论区，也欢迎关注后续内容。 继续一起观察全球医药产业如何变化。最后别忘了点赞订阅，获取更多精彩视频。